Good morning, students. Hope all of you are fine. Beta, this lecture is also in the continuation of chapter 7, and name of the chapter is an Imperial Capital-Vijaynagara. In previous lecture, we discussed about the sacred center. In that, we discussed the topic choosing a capital and Gopurams and Mandapas. With that, we discussed in detail. So beta, the today topic that we are going to discuss, it is the plotting palaces, temples and bazaars. Means how the historians they collected information and evidences and how they compile all their finding to write down history about the Vijayanagar Empire. Like we know, we have been examining a wealth of information on Vijayanagar. Photographs, plans, elevations of structure and sculpture, but how all of these are produced? Like we have read about the Mahanavami Dibba, its architecture, then we read about the various Gopurams and Mandapas, then who produced it all? But after the initial surveys by Mackenzie, information was compiled together from traveler accounts and inscriptions, and the site was preserved by the Archaeological Survey of India and the Karnataka Department of Archaeology and Museum. And in 1976, Hampi was recognized as a site of national importance. Then an important project was launched to document the material remains at Vijayanagar in detail. Beta, now what do we mean by material remains? Means whatever structures are found there, those are known as the material remain. So regarding that, extensive as well as intensive surveys were held, and using a variety of recording techniques. Means each and every evidence it was read in detail, it was interpreted in detail, and after nearly 20 years, dozens of scholars from all over the world, they worked to compile and preserve this information. Means now how they came to a final result, what was the outcome of their study? So beta, it was significantly dependent on the exercise of mapping, and the first step was to divide the entire area. Means here we are reading that how the surveyor they study about any archaeological site, right? So the first step was to divide the entire area into a set of 25 squares, each designated by a letter of the alphabet. Then each of the small square was subdivided into a set of even smaller squares. But this was not all. Each of these smaller squares was further subdivided into yet smaller unit. Means all these this site it was divided in 3 times in the smaller squares. As these figures are also given, these detailed surveys have been extremely painstaking, and it helped a lot in recovering and documenting thousands of structures, even from tiny shrines and residences to magnificent temples. They have also led to the recovery of traces of roads, paths and bazaars. बेटा जब भी आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे होता है किसी साइट का और उसकी डिटेल स्टडी की जाती है, बहुत माइन्यूटली स्टडी किया जाता है, इवन द टाइनीएस्ट स्ट्रक्चर उसको बहुत स्मॉल पार्ट्स में डिवाइड करते हैं एरिया को. लाइक वी हैव रेड कि फर्स्ट स्क्वायर 25 square, then those squares in further squares, and then 3 times they divided, and then they study every evidence thoroughly, right? And even the latter have been located through finds of pillar bases and platforms, all that remain of thriving market. It means then लाइक यू नो जो मार्केट एरिया होता है बहुत ब्रॉड एरिया होता है. सो एक्चुअली इट वॉज ऑन द पिलर्स and the platforms, and all those remains those were studied by the archaeologists. And it is also the worth remembering something that John M. Fritz, George Michael and M.S. Nagaraja Rao, who worked for years at the site, they wrote that in their study of these monuments of Vijayanagar, they have to imagine a whole series of vanished wooden elements. Because beta जो wooden होती है, it is perishable. So whatsoever wooden structures were there, about that all these archaeologists they imagine. But they found the columns, brackets, beams, all these whatsoever was of stones that was left, that was the material remain. On basis of that they just imagined the picture of the wooden structures. Although wooden structures are lost, but only stone structures survive. So the description left by travelers allow us to reconstruct some aspect of the vibrant life of the time. As being the students of history, we are well aware that how the evidences are collected and how the history is reconstructed on the basis of various evidences, textual information and documentation. Right? So now the next question is questions in search of answer. Now, how the answers are find out for various questions. So building that survived tell us about the way spaces were organized. बेटा कोई building होती है, उसका space कैसे occupy किया गया है, एंड उसका जो कंस्ट्रक्शन में कौन कौन सा मटेरियल यूज़ किया गया है, कौन सी टेक्निक यूज़ की गई है, ऑल दैट टेल अस अबाउट द आर्किटेक्चर ऑफ दैट टाइम और द मेथड ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ दैट टाइम. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वी कैन असेस द डिफेंस रिक्वायरमेंट एंड मिलिट्री प्रिपेयर्डनेस ऑफ अ सिटी बाय स्टडिंग इट्स फोर्टिफिकेशन. कि जो वहाँ के फोर्ट्स थे वो कैसे बने हुए थे, उसकी क्या फोर्ट्स की क्या स्ट्रैटेजी थी, एनी टाइप ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अटैक को प्रिवेंट करने के लिए कौन कौन से मेजर्स लिए जाते थे. सो इवन ऑल दैट टेल अस अबाउट द डिफेंस रिक्वायरमेंट. And if we compare them with buildings in other places, they convey ideas which the builders wish to project. Means suppose हमने कोई fortification को study किया और हमने कोई वहाँ की लोगों के residences को study किया, then these historians they just came to know about the differences also. And even they are often suffused with symbols which are a product of their cultural context. और बेटा इससे हमें क्या वहाँ के कल्चर का भी पता चलता है. These we can understand when we combine information from other sources like literature, inscription and popular tradition. Means अब जो material remains है उसको study करके जो हमारी findings है and जो inscriptions मिले हैं, हमें कोई और information मिली है, literature मिला है, तब दोनों को कंबाइन किया जाता है. देन दीज हिस्टोरियन दे जस्ट रीच टू एनी रिजल्ट. बिकॉज बहुत सारी चीज़ें ऐसी होती हैं विच आर कॉमन इन द लिटरेचर एंड लिटरेरी सोर्सेज एज वेल एज द मटेरियल रिमेन्स. So investigation of architectural features do not tell us what ordinary men, women and children comprising the vast majority of the people who lived in the city and its outskirts about these impressive buildings. बेटा जो आर्किटेक्चर फीचर्स होते हैं उससे हमें लोगों के ट्रेडिशंस का नहीं पता चलता. लाइक जो मैन वुमेन और चिल्ड्रन उनकी क्या मेजॉरिटी थी सोसाइटी में, सिटी के आउटस्कर्ट्स आउटर पार्ट में क्या था. सो वुड दे हैव हैड एक्सेस ऑफ एनी ऑफ द एरियाज विद द रॉयल सेंटर. अब जो लोग थे, जो वहाँ के नॉर्मल लोग थे अदर देन द रॉयल पीपल, डू दे हैव एनी एक्सेस टू द रॉयल सेंटर और द सेक्रेट सेंटर. मीन्स क्या उनको अलाउ था उन एरिया को विजिट करना. और वुड दे हरी पास द स्कल्पचर और वुड दे पोज टू सी, रिफ्लेक्ट एंड ट्राई and understand its complicated symbolism. And what did the people who worked on these colossal construction projects think of the enterprises to which they had contributed their labor. बेटा जितनी वहाँ पे हमें material remains मिले हैं, it means वहाँ पे labor भी employ होगी. Now who provided the labor over there? So many questions are there, and few questions historians they are able to find the answer, and some questions still remain unsolved. It is like a mystery. So while rulers took all important decisions about the buildings to be constructed, बेटा जितने भी important decisions होते थे उस area से related, those were taken by the rulers. And which material to be used, which architecture style to be followed. So all these things, these were the important decisions, those were taken by the rulers. बट फिर भी आता है हु ड्रू अप द प्लान्स फॉर बिल्डिंग. लाइक आजकल तो आर्किटेक्चर होते हैं, दे जस्ट मेड अ प्लान, मेड अ मैप फॉर द प्रपोज्ड एरिया. नाउ वेयर डिड द मेसन, स्टोन कटर, स्कल्पचर, हु डिड द एक्चुअल बिल्डिंग कम फ्रॉम. अब जो भी उसको लेबर प्रोवाइड की है उन बिल्डिंग को बनाने के लिए, फ्रॉम वेयर डिड दे कम फ्रॉम. सो देर आर सो मेनी थिंग्स दैट how the wages were given, who supervised the building activity, how was building material transported, and where did it come from. So there are so many questions that we cannot answer by merely looking at the buildings or their remains. So continuing research using other sources might provide some other clues. Like I was telling you, beta, history, it is based on the evidences, literary sources, material remains. So some answers we have already found, and for other, research is continuing. So beta, this was the topic about today. Hope all of you have understood the topic. Thank you and have a nice day.